We'll go ahead and get started. So yesterday we had a great conversation with district and county superintendents, and some of you folks were on the line, so we appreciate that. We're getting a lot of questions as the school year is within sight for a lot of districts. So I think that we'll probably keep having those calls on a weekly basis just as new information becomes available, to bounce ideas off of each other. And we've asked superintendents to send their thoughts on the remainder of the school year to our OPI COVID-19 at mt.gov email address, as well as McCall said they can send them to her email address as those decisions are being made for the next 6 or 7 weeks. Anyways, I did kind of want to just jump into it with the latest information we have under the governor's directive. McCall, do you have anything you want to add, or any of the associations on the line, anything that you want to add about your thoughts on the extension?
Thanks, Dylan. It's McCall. Just quick to reiterate that this basically just extends for 2 more weeks through the 24th. In this directive, the governor said that it was not necessary for school districts to submit another plan as long as that plan is the same thing that they've been operating under. If school districts do drastically change or revise their plans, we're encouraging them to please send those to us just so we can kind of monitor and see if there's any new or interesting or creative things that districts are doing as they're learning kind of these remote learning techniques and what's working for them and what's not. Under this directive, the governor also entered a section that I know our education advocate group had asked for, which talks about the deadlines for new contractual obligations relating to technological services. So we did suspend that statute for the limited purpose of responding to the emergency. So that will be definitely helpful and provide more flexibility to school districts as they're looking to get connected to Zoom and Skype.
Thanks, McCall. And I know I've received a lot of phone calls from districts, big and small, on graduation ceremonies. And I think it's a good idea for us to all talk about guidance. I know McCall has to be careful. They're operating on 2-week time frames based on the best public health information that they have. But districts are asking, superintendents are asking us as they talk to their board, kind of just informally what we're recommending. I've said I can't imagine that you will be able to have a graduation ceremony in May. It's the national guidance is going through the month of May. And so I've been cautioning against planning a full-scale in-person graduation in the month of May. I mean, Kirk, where are you at with that? Or Dennis, Lance?
This is Lance. We've been saying the same thing, that we see Governor Bullock following closely with the different models out there that he's referencing in his own decision making. And if you take a look at those underlying models, there's nothing in any of the models that would suggest that it would be safe to have a large gathering of people in a single place at any time in the near future. That even if the orders are lifted, the recommendations of 6-foot distancing are likely to continue into the foreseeable future. Gathering restrictions on people, or not restrictions, but recommendations on vulnerable populations, and that this is probably going to be some degree of disruption to the quote-unquote usual way of things for 12 to 18 months, depending upon whether there's either highly effective therapeutic remedies that become available or ultimately the development and distribution of a vaccine.
Okay, thanks for that, Lance. Yeah, it sounds like you guys are being even more cautious than I've been. But yeah, it seems like the month of May is what everyone's asking about. And I've just been saying I can't imagine that you will be allowed to do that in the month of May. So
if there is a way then with our expertise joined together to have not necessarily one message, because we want uniqueness, but I would be more than happy to put a link on our website to anyone else's, including, school board policy, anything, just to give guidance. Our website is used by multiple, so for policymakers, from other people that are seeking things from outside of our state, as well as parents and families. If there is some way that we could put this together where we are, how do I want to say, we are joined in a concerted, simple message regarding health and safety, I would be very appreciative of that. That's one of the things that we are lacking on our website right now is the graduation discussion.
Yeah, and I don't see Kirk on the line, but Lance, is that something you think would be valuable to pursue, is that we put out some joint guidance that in-person graduation ceremonies probably should not be conducted at least in May or June even?
Yeah, I think that we can put something together. Again, we're going to be doing much the same as you, of following the governor's lead, and then just referencing that even in the absence of a directive, because right now we're operating under a directive that would prohibit graduation ceremonies, but even in the absence of that directive, there's likely to be residual recommendations that would make it infeasible in the time frame that we're looking at for holding a traditional graduation ceremony.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lance. Do you
I'd like
want
to add something, if you don't mind?
Oh yeah, please do, Dennis.
Thanks, Dylan. I agree with everything that's been said. I've been asked the same question here most recently, and what I've started all of my comments with is highly recommend that you plan to have graduation without being able to gather, and that you have those plans in place. And I'm in no way trying to second guess the governor, but I think I can't imagine the difficulty of making a decision to rescind the closure order for schools. It's a really complicated decision, and I think everyone's outlined it really well myself. So anyway, for whatever that's worth to you, I think they should have plans to do that, and then I think we're all assuming that those plans will be carried out.
Thanks, Dennis. Well, maybe I'll go ahead and take a first stab at just a one-pager guidance, and then I'll send it around to everyone for your edits. And I think that our respective audiences would appreciate that.
I think so. Thank you.
Kind of piggybacking off that, school leaders in general are asking for flexibility, or not so much flexibility, but certainty for the remainder of the school year. So the superintendent did send a recommendation to the governor's office yesterday, which was forwarded to all of you this morning, saying that if the school closure directives are not extended and a district still has time left in their academic calendar, that those districts be allowed to continue under their remote plans if they want to, or some mix of their remote plans and a partial return. What I've been hearing is that districts largely at this point want to continue operating under the remote learning plan. It would be a hurdle to bring people back in for 1 or 2 weeks, or they want to do some mix of continuing their remote learning and maybe bringing in some kids that need additional assistance. But basically that's what the letter says, is that even if the school closure is not extended, those districts should be allowed to continue under their remote learning plans, is basically it. Any thoughts or comments on that?
Dylan, can I?
Dylan, this is Lance.
Go ahead, Lance.
Go ahead. Well, I just want to make sure you guys know, and I'm going off of law that we passed in 2005, and that is sitting there crystal clear in the code. And with complete respect to everybody who would have oversight over our schools, we've been candidly advising school districts that that's entirely within their prerogative. And if you look at the definition of A and B in 25-1015, that says that A and B includes anyone receiving educational services at an off-site instructional setting. 29-311 sub 10 specifically provides that you can provide off-site instruction if the pupil is offered access to the complete range of educational services. And 20-5-311 sub 11 says a district can, for A and B purposes, enroll a pupil who's involved in off-site instruction. It says enrolled in an educational program using electronic or off-site delivery methods. So we've told districts, if the governor lifts his order, then the prerogative is yours as to whether you go back and satisfy aggregate hours of instruction on an on-site basis, or if you continue and provide off-site, as long as you meet the aggregate hours through any combination of on-site or off-site, you're golden. And I think the law is crystal clear on the subject, as is the Board of Public Ed standards under 10.55.906 subsection 4. So I'm not trying to pick a fight at all. I'm just want to be transparent and let you all know that that's exactly what we have advised our districts and what we're prepared to defend.
Thanks, Lance. And Cheryl's here in the room too. Does that require them to pass any sort of individualized learning plan or?
No, the only thing
No.
that comes to mind is that aggregate hours have been waived to this point. And so then what becomes the aggregate hours that have to be met between this point and the end of the school year? And that would be the big question mark. So I think it's really important that that idea of aggregate hours is for the most part a virtual impossibility.
That's, I think, what we were getting at, is we don't want them to be held to those aggregate hours if they're continuing their remote learning.
Exactly.
Well, but Dylan, a school district, throw away this COVID business. Let's just pretend it didn't happen. Any school district in the state is entitled to provide a full digital learning environment. I'm not recommending that they do so. I'm saying what the law says. The law gives them that prerogative, and they have to account for their aggregate hours of instruction in an off-site setting in exactly the same way, no more and no less than they have to establish in a seat time class-based setting. They have to report to OPI and be prepared to defend the legitimacy that they have actually provided aggregate hours of instruction meeting the conditions of the law.
Okay, thanks, Lance. That's great. You guys are getting that messaging out there. McCall, did you want to jump in?
I was just gonna briefly comment on, you know, some of the questions from yesterday around local control. And, you know, I think from the beginning that we've offered local control to districts, and the fact that they've been able to, you know, enter into these remote learning plans or not do one. I think also that, you know, we're making these decisions to keep people and communities safe. So, you know, for us, I think right now to make a decision to close through the rest of the school year is somewhat short-sighted. And, you know, the governor's been making all these decisions on a 2-week basis based on information that we have from health experts. And I totally understand, you know, that school districts are anxious to, you know, have a lot of their questions answered around graduation or what that looks like if they do go back and how that transition would be. But I think, like Lance said, if school districts, you know, want to start preparing for that, I don't think that we're telling them no, but I just think that districts can make that decision now. But I don't think that from, you know, our point of view in the governor's office, that we need to make a decision to close schools through the rest of the year. And I certainly want to have more conversations around this and, you know, figure out what that looks like to be helpful to districts. But these are really tough decisions, and I know the governor doesn't take them lightly. So we're doing the best we can to, you know, be as upfront as we possibly can as well.
This is Dianne Burke, and I think one thing to look at with this as well is just the practical nature of the question, are parents going to want to send their children back to school? I think that there's going to be an abundance of caution in a lot of areas, and even if schools open up, there's still going to be a lot of people who want to continue remote learning because they think that's the safest course for their child.
Right.
Yep. Thanks, Dianne. Is there anyone else that wants to jump in on this topic? Angela, you had a comment in here about graduation ceremonies.
Yes, I did, Dylan. Thank you very much. Yeah, we have a repository of resources that we've shared from the University system, I think, with your folks. I think maybe the exchange went to you or to Tracy or to both you and Tracy yesterday from Christine in our office. And then I was just emailing you, Dylan, when you called my name. And I'd love to sit down with you and visit on the phone about that repository and maybe about some ideas to support students, their families, and schools in this time, and do it maybe under the umbrella of the I Graduate Montana initiative. So just some ideas. One of the things I think that we did that is, helping to waylay some of the uncertainty for our students, and I realize that the nature of graduations are so very important to everybody, is one of the things that we did in our campuses, got out on it last week along with our office, was we communicated that a fall or winter ceremony would be something that would be an opportunity. I know that this is, again, very different with these high school graduations and these students leaving for a plethora of opportunities. But I think if we could work with districts to Dennis's point, to convey some graduation opportunity at some date certain, I think that would be very well received, because in the absence of that uncertainty, I saw a couple of even petitions to campuses making sure that students would have some sort of in-person graduation. So I think if we could do something that would elevate the certainty in the minds of our students and their families, I think that would be very well received.
Thanks, Angela. That'd be great. Yeah, if we could follow up on that. Anything else on this topic?
Dylan, this is Lance. I just sent you guys a quick email in response to an earlier message that you folks sent out that just quotes the sections of law that we've been relying upon in giving districts advice that they may be able to make individual decisions if and when the governor determines it's appropriate to lift that order. Also want to just make sure McCall and others know that we appreciate the governor's continued cautious approach and focus on this underlying science, and we're impressed and appreciative that that is the basis of those decisions. So fully support the idea of making those decisions as the time goes by, so that the governor is certain that he's using the latest available science and research available to make the appropriate decision and not put us into a position where we reverse course. So just want to make sure you knew that.
Thanks, Lance. Appreciate that email and those statutes. That'll be helpful for us as we talk to districts. So anything else on this one? Great. Well, I'll go ahead and work on getting, like I said, a draft letter and shoot it around to everyone, so everyone's kind of aware of where we're at on the guidance that schools should probably not be planning anything in the next month or two. Ken, are you on the line? Do you want to, I think everyone's kind of aware with where we're at on the Department of Education updates, but do you want to just briefly recap what you talked about with superintendents yesterday?
Sure, Dylan. So there's been no updates that have come to us from the department regarding the emergency relief fund and any guidance, et cetera, that is in addition to what is in the CARES Act itself. There was a CCSSO webinar yesterday, and at that webinar, Assistant Secretary Brogan discussed the outlook on what the department is doing. And in that, he stated that within a couple of days, he expected that the department would issue timelines on the distribution of funds. And I really hope that what that means is they're going to put out a pretty complete plan that will also include the application that's going to be required for states, and that we'll start getting some guidance of any tweaks that the department might be putting in for distributing these funds. There was a big discussion too that is philosophical, I guess, of talking about the funding that's coming to education now is being supplemental in nature, meant to be a very short-term help to districts for all the issues that have come with coronavirus, and an expectation that there will be further stimulus funding. And again, that's going to require Congress to pass something that will focus on money for schools for the process of opening schools up again and provide more funding. Of course, that's speculative at this point, but I think it's good to hear that being expressed, and that the possibility of further federal funding for education may be in the works. There was also a lot of discussion about the waiver process, and I know Julie's going to talk about that a little bit, but again, the emphasis is the department is trying to do everything that it can to provide flexibility to school districts in a lot of different ways. There was a lot of talk about using Title IV money, for example, for infrastructure and purchase of things that are required to provide online learning, et cetera. And again, that requires a waiver. And again, I'll let Julie cover that. The point, I think, is again, the continued focus by the department on trying to offer the most flexibility to school districts that they can. I think that just about covers it, Dylan, unless there's something I missed from your point of view.
No, that's great, Ken. Thanks. And then do you have an update on state revenue? I have that on the agenda as well.
You know, I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of different people about what's going to happen as we go into the next session and that kind of stuff. What I want to point to is that there's been a document that's been posted on the LFD site by Amy Carlson, in which she points to a monthly COVID-19 update that they will start publishing beginning in mid-April that will focus on the impacts. And in there it talks about the first one will focus on general fund and federal funding that we're going to receive. That document has an excellent table attached to it that basically takes all of the CARES provisions, breaks down the funds across the country that have been appropriated for different purposes, and lists which agency in the state is going to receive those funds. There's also a column that shows the amount of money for each of those that Montana is going to receive. But in most cases right now, it's got a to be determined abbreviation in it. But again, a very good document in terms of understanding overall what CARES Act may mean to Montana. You know, there's also a good place to look that I've done in the past is the Department of Revenue puts out a monthly summary of collections. And usually they do it pretty quickly after the end of the month. I've noticed that they haven't updated that for March yet. And again, I think there's a lot of sensitivity about how that's going to be portrayed and you know, some thinking about what's going to be in the future. So again, we'll have a link to that document and as those things come up, but there's no need to necessarily just go to our link. Obviously, this is available on the LFD site and the other reports available on the Department of Revenue site. So that's what I know about overall revenue for the state. It's obviously going to be an impact of COVID-19, but it's certainly too soon to know what's going on.
Thanks, Ken. And back to a topic that seems like eons ago, the DPHHS school safety and lead rules. Tracy, do you want to talk about updates on that as it relates to the COVID outbreak?
Sure, thanks, Dylan. Good morning, everyone. This is Tracy Mosman. I've been in conversations with BJ Biskubiak from DPHHS as well as Greg Montgomery from DEQ. They both completely understand the situation that schools are up against and they want to offer as much flexibility as possible for schools. They have drafted some language that will go out to schools, just reminding them of that flexibility and of the DPHHS website. and DEQ website that exists for current resources for schools, especially as it relates to the lead testing. DEQ is also looking at trying to receive a no-cost extension for the grant that pays for those, for the lead tests, so that schools aren't up against that timeline that was outlined in the rule. At this point in time, BJ's not thinking that they want to adjust the timeline as it's stated in rule, because that would require a rule change, but they want to be as flexible as possible with schools, and certainly understand that there could be a big push starting in the fall to administer the lead tests, knowing that a lot of schools aren't going to be able to have that accomplished this spring.
Thanks, Tracy. Is there anything on that? I know this group's been pretty active in those rules.
Dylan, this is Dianne Burke. I've been working with Greg Montgomery and also Amy Steinmetz about the grant application to the EPA that was for some of the mitigation funds. That originally had a deadline, I think, of April 15th for the grant submission, and that has been extended to June 1st, I believe. Yeah, June 1st. So we've got another 6 weeks to work on that grant, even though the grant is pretty well in final form at this point, I believe, and the DEQ is going to be in charge of submitting that.
Thanks, Diane. This is Tracy. Greg did reach out to me yesterday and asked if OPI could provide a little bit of information that they'll include in their narrative. They want to know if those funds flow through OPI for some of the mitigation support for schools, who the project manager would be, and some things like that. So I'll be working with Greg hopefully tomorrow to get him what he needs to finish up that section as well.
Sounds good. Thanks for the update, Tracy.
Great, thanks, Tracy. Next, we have some additional federal waivers. Julie Murgel, if you could touch on those.
Morning, Dylan. Thank you. Yes, this is Julie Murgel, the ESSA director here at the Montana OPI. First, I want to share some information regarding 2 federal waivers that have been submitted and approved to the U.S. Department of Education. In particular, I want to share recent information on the flexibility for use of existing federal dollars that was granted yesterday. In light of the COVID-19 and CARES Act waivers on ESEA spending, we are currently gathering comments and questions that you might have or anticipate that educational leaders may have related to Title I carryover, tidings extensions, district level budget amendments, or other issues. We do have a posting on our OPI website on the COVID-19 section, where we are also seeking questions and comments regarding this flexibility funding. We want to be sure here at the OPI that we support our education leaders to think strategically about taking advantage of these flexibilities to allow for more nimble responses to conditions on the ground, and consider how to align existing state and federal resources with the new CARES Act funding. Like I said, this information is posted on our OPI COVID-19 webpage. But back on March 26th, we did submit and receive approval from the department to waive assessments, the accountability and reporting waivers. In particular, the assessment requirements to administer those assessments for 1920, that has been granted, and the accountability and school identification requirements to meaningfully differentiate our schools for comprehensive and targeted support and improvement has also been waived, as well as portions of the report card provisions to certain assessments, reporting on that report card, because we will not have the data from the assessments on 1920. That was the original waiver that was put into the department in a simplified process on the 26th of March and granted. A second waiver has recently come out for us. The department is providing these funding flexibilities to best meet the needs of students and educators during this COVID national emergency. The flexibilities authorized under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act allows schools to repurpose existing K-12 education funds for technology infrastructure and teacher training on distant learning, among other flexibilities to move resources to the areas of highest need. The waiver provides flexibility in the use of funds or other requirements covered under the ESEA Act. And so that includes carryover limitations for Title I, so that the ability for the districts to waive 15% Title I carryover has been waived. The period of availability of funds, to extend the period of availability from fiscal year 18 funds, programs for which the SEA participates, to September 30th of 2021. And this covers all sections under Title I, from Title I Part A, Part B, Part C, Part D, as well as some pieces for Title II, III, and IV. The following requirements for Title IV, Part A, have also been waived, and these requirements are only applicable to districts that received $30,000 or more under Title IV, Part A funds. The needs assessment requirement for the 1920 school year has been waived. Content areas spending requirements have been waived under Part A, as well as spending limitations of the 15% for technology has been waived. The fourth component of this funding waiver, so beyond the Title I carryover for 15%, beyond the ability to extend the federal funding for 18 funds all the way up to 21, and these particular components for Title IV, Part A, if you do receive $30,000, the last thing that this waiver addresses is the definition of professional development. That has also been waived. And so there's a lot within this flexibility of this last funding that we just received yesterday. So again, love to hear any comments or questions that you all might have or anticipate that might be out in the field, not necessarily to answer them right now, but to just gather some things and some thinking so that we can be sure that we're strategically supporting our schools as they look at all of these different funding flexibilities that have recently been approved.
Thanks, Julie. And Jack is unable to join us this morning, but I think Julie kind of covered that aspect of his update as well. Are there any questions for Julie? With that, are there any other reps on the line that would like to provide updates? We've got education associations. It sounds like we've got some representatives from the congressional offices, and Dylan Houston had to jump off, but if Linda's still on, of course, you're welcome to update us too. If not, I want to respect everyone's time. We know you're hard at work. I think we still have these scheduled twice a week here for the foreseeable future. So, Superintendent.
I just want to say thank you. As we enter into, this is Holy Week again, and as we enter into Easter, we need to count our blessings in Montana and also our partnerships that are here advocating for education, the flexibility that we are now seeking. So there's a lot of positive within our partnerships, and I want to say thank you. So enjoy your weekend, and we'll visit again on Tuesday. Our advocate meetings will go through the governor's orders in this 2-week period. So we'll be meeting on Tuesdays and Thursdays at this time. Thank you all, and please stay safe.